When Miranda Cole closed her office door that Tuesday afternoon, I thought I was about to lose my job. I had been called into her corner office on the 42nd floor, the one with the full glass walls and the perfect view of the Chicago skyline. Normally, I liked that view. It reminded me how far I had come. But that day, I didn't even look at it. I stood in front of her desk with my portfolio under my arm, my heart steady but my mind running through every possible mistake I might have made. The numbers were strong. My team had beaten projections by 18%. There was no reason for me to be nervous, which meant something was wrong. "Close the door, Ethan," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was something under it, something tight. I turned and shut the door. The soft click sounded louder than it should have. The rest of the executive floor moved outside the glass walls, people walking past, assistants talking quietly, life going on like always. No one could hear what was about to happen in that room. Miranda didn't look like the powerful CEO I had worked under for 4 years. She wasn't wearing her usual strong expression. She looked unsure. "Sit down," she said. I sat across from her. The leather chair felt cold. She took off her glasses and placed them carefully on the desk. Her hands rested on the table, but I noticed her fingers were slightly shaking. "I'm going to tell you something," she said slowly, "and I need you to let me finish before you say anything." My stomach tightened. "All right." She took a breath. "I'm pregnant." For a second, my brain switched into business mode. Maternity leave, leadership adjustments, board reactions. I was already planning how to support her during a transition. Then she looked straight into my eyes. "The baby is yours." Everything inside me stopped. 3 months ago, Denver, the tech conference, the hotel bar after the final panel. We had both been exhausted, honest in a way we never were at work. We talked for hours about pressure, about loneliness, about the masks we wore every day. One drink turned into two, a laugh turned into silence. Silence turned into a kiss. It had been one night, one unplanned, reckless human night. The next morning we agreed it was a mistake, not because it wasn't good. It had been too good, but because she was my boss. Because I was a single father, because complicated was an understatement. We flew back to Chicago on separate flights and never spoke of it again, until now. "How far along?" I heard myself ask. My voice sounded calm, too calm. 11 weeks, she said. "I found out 6 days ago. I went to 2 doctors to be sure." 11 weeks. That meant this was real. This wasn't a scare. This wasn't a maybe. This was a child, my child. "I'm not asking you for anything," she continued quickly. "Not money, not involvement, not even acknowledgement. I can handle this on my own. I just thought you deserved to know." Something hot rose in my chest. "You think I'd walk away?" She held my gaze. "You're a single father, Ethan. You've built your career with discipline. You already have a 7-year-old daughter. I wouldn't blame you if you wanted to pretend this never happened." I stood up and walked to the window. Chicago stretched below me, busy and loud and full of lives intersecting in ways no one planned. I lost my wife when my daughter Sophie was 6 months old, breast cancer. She was gone before Sophie turned 1. For 6.5 years I had been both parents. I learned how to braid hair from YouTube videos. I packed lunches. I sat through school plays alone. I answered the question every parent fears. Why don't I have a mom like the other kids? I turned back to Miranda. "I won't walk away," I said quietly. Her expression changed. Not relief. Not yet, something more careful. "You don't have to do this out of duty." "This isn't duty." I moved back to the chair but didn't sit. "There's a baby coming into this world. I know what it's like to grow up missing someone. I won't let my child feel that." The room went silent. Miranda looked at me like she hadn't expected that answer. "Do you want this baby?" I asked her. That was the real question. She looked down at her hands. "I'm 39, she said softly. "I've spent 20 years building this company. I never planned for children. I've always been careful." She gave a short laugh with no humor in it. "Apparently antibiotics and birth control don't always work well together." She looked back at me, and for the first time since I had known her, I saw fear. "I don't know if I want this baby," she whispered. "I can't stop thinking about it, about who they would be. But I'm terrified. I don't know how to be a mother. I understood that fear. I had lived it. Nobody knows how to be a parent until they are one, I said. You learn, you make mistakes, you try again. And if I decide I can't do this? The word hung in the air without being said. If you decide not to continue the pregnancy, I said slowly, I'll be part of that conversation, but I need to be part of it. This isn't just happening to you. She studied me for a long moment. You're taking this surprisingly well. I'm not, I admitted. I'm just good at holding it together. A small smile touched her lips. I have my first full appointment next week, she said. Ultrasound and everything. I'll be there. You don't have to. I want to. We sat there, the weight of everything pressing down on us. I have to tell Sophie, I said finally. Her eyes widened. You're going to tell your daughter. She's my daughter. I don't lie to her about important things. Later that afternoon, I picked Sophie up from school. She ran toward me like she always did, her blonde ponytail bouncing. Dad, guess what happened in math today? I listened to her talk about fractions and her teacher praising her. I memorized the sound of her voice because I knew things were about to change. That night, at the kitchen table with apple slices and peanut butter between us, I told her, Miss Cole is going to have a baby, I said gently, and that baby is going to be your brother or sister. Her eyes went wide. Are you going to love the baby more than me? That question broke me. I moved beside her and pulled her into my arms. Never, you are my whole heart. Love doesn't run out, it grows. She looked at me carefully. Is Miss Cole scared? The question caught me off guard. I think she is, I said honestly. Sophie nodded seriously. You should tell her it's going to be okay. You're really good at being a dad. You can help her. Later that night, after Sophie was asleep, my phone buzzed. Miranda. I can't sleep, she texted. Me neither, I replied. There was a pause before her next message. I'm scared, Ethan. I stared at the screen for a long time. So am I typed back. But you're not alone. And as I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, I realized something. This wasn't just about responsibility. This was about showing up. I had faced impossible before. I had stood beside hospital beds and made promises I didn't know how to keep. I had learned that running from fear only made it bigger. And now, whether I was ready or not, my life was about to change again. The difference this time, I wouldn't be doing it alone. Neither would she. The first time I heard my baby's heartbeat, something inside me broke open. It was the following Wednesday. I met Miranda in the lobby of the medical building downtown. She was dressed simply, no power suit, no sharp heels, just jeans and a soft sweater. She looked smaller somehow, not like the woman who commanded boardrooms. You came, she said quietly. I said I would. We rode the elevator up in silence. The waiting room was filled with other couples. Some were laughing, some were nervous. Some were holding hands like their whole world depended on it. Miranda and I sat side by side but not touching, not yet. When the nurse called her name, she looked at me like she was asking a question without speaking. I stood up with her. Inside the exam room, everything felt too white, too bright, too real. Dr. Patel smiled warmly as she prepared the machine. First pregnancy? She asked Miranda. Yes, Miranda answered. And you're the father? She asked, looking at me. Yes. Those words hit differently than I expected. Father. Dr. Patel moved the wand across Miranda's stomach and the screen flickered. At first I didn't understand what I was looking at. Just shadows and shapes. Then she adjusted something. There, she said gently, that's your baby. A tiny figure, curled, fragile, alive. And then we heard it, fast, strong, steady, a heartbeat. Miranda grabbed my hand without thinking. Her fingers were cold. Oh my God, she whispered. My throat tightened. I had heard a heartbeat like that before, years ago when Julia was pregnant with Sophie. But this felt different. This was unexpected, unplanned, and somehow just as powerful. That's our baby, Miranda said, her voice shaking. Our baby, I repeated. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the board, not the company, not the gossip that would eventually follow. Just that sound. After the appointment, we stood in the parking garage like neither of us knew what to say next. I wasn't sure before, Miranda admitted, but hearing that, I don't think I can walk away from this. Relief washed over me so fast it almost made me dizzy. You don't have to, I said. We'll figure it out. She looked at me carefully. You keep saying we. That's because it is we. That evening, Miranda texted me something unexpected. Would you and Sophie like to come over for dinner? I stared at the message for a long time. This was new territory. Are you sure? I typed back. No, she replied honestly. But I think I need to start getting used to this being real. So that night, Sophie changed outfits 3 times before settling on her purple dress with stars on it. Do you think she'll like me? She asked in the car. She's going to love you, I said. Miranda's apartment overlooked Lake Michigan. It was clean and modern and clearly not designed for children. Everything was white or glass. She opened the door and smiled when she saw Sophie. You must be Sophie. You're having my sister, Sophie announced proudly. Miranda blinked and then laughed softly. I guess I am. Dinner was simple, pizza. Sophie talked nonstop about space and school and how she planned to teach the baby everything important. Miranda listened, really listened, and I watched something change in her. She wasn't the distant CEO in that moment. She was a woman imagining what it might feel like to have a child run through her apartment. Later, while Sophie watched a movie in the living room, Miranda and I stood in the kitchen. She's incredible, Miranda said quietly. She is. You did that, she added. You raised her. I shrugged. I just showed up every day. Miranda looked at me like that meant more than I realized. Over the next few weeks, a strange routine formed. I brought ginger tea when morning sickness hit hard. I made lists. I researched things I had already learned once before with Sophie. Miranda pretended she didn't need help, but she accepted it. We kept things professional at work. No one knew. But outside the office, something else was growing. Then one morning, everything changed. I was in a meeting when Miranda's assistant rushed in pale. She collapsed. I didn't remember running, but suddenly I was at her office. Paramedics were beside her. There was blood on her skirt. Is the baby? I couldn't finish the sentence. We're taking her to Northwestern, one of them said. You can ride with us. In the ambulance, Miranda gripped my hand. I'm scared, she whispered. I know, I said, but I'm here. At the hospital, they separated us. I paced the waiting room like a man losing his mind. When the doctor finally came out, I could barely breathe. The baby's heartbeat is still strong, she said. But Miranda has a subchorionic hematoma. She's at high risk for complications. She needs complete bed rest. Relief and fear hit me at the same time. When I saw Miranda, she looked exhausted, smaller than ever. I can't run a company from bed, she said weakly. You can delegate, I replied. The board won't like it. I don't care what they like. She looked at me then, really looked at me. When did you become this fierce? The moment I heard that heartbeat, I said honestly. She needed help, real help, not just emotional support. And without even thinking it through, I said the words that changed everything. I'll stay. You have Sophie, she protested. We'll make it work. And we did. I worked from her apartment. Sophie came after school. We turned her pristine space into something warmer, messier, real. But the board didn't stay quiet. They called emergency meetings. They questioned her leadership. They questioned her judgment. And then one of them said something that made my blood boil. Getting pregnant by a subordinate shows poor professionalism. Before Miranda could respond, I leaned toward the speakerphone. This pregnancy doesn't make her less capable, I said evenly. If anything, it proves she can handle more than any of you. There was silence on the line. After the call ended, Miranda stared at me. You just risked your job. I don't care. She didn't argue after that. Weeks passed. The bleeding stopped. The baby grew stronger. At 16 weeks during another ultrasound, Dr. Patel smiled. Would you like to know the gender? Miranda looked at me. Yes, we said together, it's a girl. Sophie screamed with joy in the exam room. A sister. I'm going to have a sister. I felt something shift in my chest. Another daughter. Another little girl who would look at me like I was her whole world. That night after Sophie fell asleep in the guest room at Miranda's apartment, we sat in the dark. She deserves more than just survival, Miranda said quietly. She deserves a real family. I didn't answer right away, because the truth was I had started to want that too, not just for the baby, but for us. And for the first time since Julia died, the idea of loving someone again didn't feel impossible. It felt terrifying, but possible. The first time I felt my daughter kick, I stopped breathing. We were 22 weeks in. Miranda was still on modified bed rest at home, though she had slowly started working a few hours a day from her couch. I was sitting at her dining table with my laptop open when she called my name. Ethan. There was something different in her voice. I stood up immediately. What's wrong? Her eyes were wide, not scared, not this time. She's moving, not the little flutters, really moving. She grabbed my hand and placed it on her belly, right there. I held my breath, and then I felt it, a small push against my palm, like someone knocking from the inside. Miranda laughed softly, her whole face glowing in a way I had never seen before. She's saying hello, she whispered. I swallowed hard. Hi, baby girl. Another kick, this one stronger. Miranda's fingers tightened around my wrist. She's real, she said, her voice breaking. I know she's been real this whole time, but this feels different. I nodded slowly. With Sophie, I had missed that first moment. Julia had called me after it happened, and by the time I got home, Sophie had stopped moving. This time I was here. I kept my hand there longer than I should have, long enough to realize something else. I didn't just feel connected to the baby. I felt connected to Miranda. She looked at me, and for a second the room felt too small, too quiet. I pulled my hand back first. I should call Sophie, I said, stepping away. Miranda studied me. You always do that. Do what? Step back when things start to feel real. I forced a small smile. We agreed on boundaries. She didn't argue, but she didn't look convinced either. That night, Sophie lay on the floor next to Miranda's couch with her ear pressed gently against her belly. I think she likes my voice, Sophie announced proudly after another kick. She moved when I told her about Jupiter. She's already learning from the best, I said. Miranda watched us both with a soft expression. Later, after Sophie had gone to sleep in the guest room, Miranda and I sat in the dark living room. Can I ask you something? She said, sure. What was Julia like? The question caught me off guard. I hadn't talked about Julia much with Miranda, not really. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling for a second. She was sunlight, I said quietly. She made everything feel lighter. She talked to strangers like they were old friends. She loved fiercely, and she never did anything halfway. Miranda listened carefully. She would have been an amazing mother to 2 girls, she said softly. She was an amazing mother to one, I replied. Silence settled between us. Do you still love her? Miranda asked gently. Yes, I said without hesitation. But it's different now. It's not the kind of love that stops me from living. It's the kind that reminds me to. Miranda nodded slowly. I've never needed anyone before, she admitted. I built everything on my own. I've always been proud of that. You still built it, I said. Needing someone doesn't erase that. She looked down at her belly. What if I can't be both? She whispered. What if being a mother makes me a worse CEO? You won't be perfect at both, I said honestly. Nobody is, but you'll show up, and that's what matters. She was quiet for a long time after that. A few nights later, Sophie asked me something that I wasn't ready for. Dad, do you love Miss Cole? We were sitting at the kitchen table at home, working on her math homework. I froze. Why would you ask that? Because you look at her like she's important, she said simply. I didn't know whether to laugh or panic. She is important, I said carefully. She's your sister's mom. But do you love her like in the movies? I looked at my daughter, who had already lost one mother and learned more about life than most adults. I don't know yet, I admitted. Sophie smiled like she knew something I didn't. I think you do, she said. Back at Miranda's apartment, the tension between us had started to change. Not awkward, not forced. Just charged. We worked side by side, ate together, fell into an easy rhythm that felt dangerously close to normal. One evening at 34 weeks, we were reviewing a presentation for the board. Sophie was asleep in the guest room. It was late. Miranda looked exhausted. You need to sleep, I said. I can't, she replied. What if tomorrow goes badly? What if they push me out? Then we handle it. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple, but it's survivable. She looked at me for a long moment. Why are you really doing this? She asked softly, defending me, staying, choosing to be here. Because I care about you. The words sat in my throat. Instead, I said, because she deserves both of us. Miranda studied me. That's not the only reason, she said. She was right. I took a slow breath. Somewhere along the way, I admitted, this stopped being just about responsibility. The air shifted. Miranda's voice dropped. What are you saying? I'm saying that I care about you, not just as my boss, not just as the mother of my child. Her eyes filled with tears instantly. You can't, she whispered. This is too complicated. Complicated doesn't mean impossible. What if we ruin everything? She asked. What if it doesn't work? What if it does? I countered. I moved closer, gently brushing a tear from her cheek. Tell me you don't feel this too, I said quietly. She didn't answer right away. Then she shook her head. I do, she admitted. And that scares me more than anything. I leaned my forehead against hers. I'm scared too. There it was, the truth we had both been avoiding. She whispered the words first. I think I'm falling in love with you. My heart slammed against my ribs. I think I already have, I said, and then I kissed her, soft, careful, like we were both afraid of breaking something fragile. For a moment everything else disappeared, the board, the risk, the fear, it was just us. And then Miranda gasped, her body tensed. What's wrong? I pulled back immediately. She looked down, there was water on the couch. It's too early, she whispered. It's too early. Her water had broken. Panic flooded my chest. I'm calling Marcus, I said, already reaching for my phone. We're going to the hospital. Another contraction hit her, and she gripped my arm hard. Ethan, she said through clenched teeth, if something goes wrong. Nothing's going wrong, I said firmly. But inside, fear roared louder than it had since the day I lost Julia. As I helped her to the car, as I drove through red lights toward Northwestern Memorial, as she squeezed my hand and breathed through the pain, one thought repeated in my mind. Not again. Please, not again. This time I couldn't lose them. I wouldn't. The drive to the hospital felt endless. Miranda's breathing filled the car, sharp and controlled between contractions. I kept one hand on the wheel and the other wrapped around hers. It's too early, she whispered again. She's not ready. She's stronger than we think, I said, even though fear was pounding in my chest. When we reached Northwestern Memorial, the staff was already waiting. They rushed her into labor and delivery while I handled the paperwork with shaking hands. By the time I got into her room, monitors were attached to her stomach. The sound of our daughter's heartbeat filled the space, fast but uneven. Dr. Martinez came in quickly. Her expression was calm but serious. The baby is in distress, she said. Her heart rate is dropping during contractions. We need to do an emergency C-section. Miranda's face went pale. I wanted natural, she whispered. I know, the doctor said gently, but right now we focus on safety. Miranda looked at me, fear, trust, love, all of it in her eyes. If something goes wrong, she said quietly, you save her. Nothing is going wrong, I replied firmly. You're both coming back to me. Minutes later, I was in scrubs, standing beside her in the operating room. I had done this once before with Julia. The memory hit me hard, but this time was different. This time I wasn't losing someone, I was fighting to gain someone. I held Miranda's hand as the doctors worked behind the curtain. You're doing amazing, I whispered into her ear. Then I heard it, a thin, fragile cry, the most beautiful sound in the world. It's a girl, Dr. Martinez announced. They brought her around the curtain. She was tiny, so small it almost hurt to look at her, but she was crying, she was breathing. "She's 4 pounds 3 ounces," the nurse said. "Small but strong." Miranda let out a sob that broke something open inside me. "Grace," she whispered. "Grace Julia Ward Cole, our daughter." They placed her against Miranda's chest for a brief moment before taking her to the NICU. "She's breathing on her own," the doctor reassured us. "That's a very good sign." When they wheeled Miranda into recovery, I stayed beside her. "We did it," she murmured weakly. "No," I corrected softly. "You did it." The next 2 weeks were the hardest and the most beautiful of my life. Grace stayed in the NICU under bright lights and careful monitoring. She was small, but every day she gained a little more strength. Sophie visited every afternoon after school. She would stand by the glass and talk to her sister. "Hi, Grace. I'm your big sister. I'm going to teach you about space and fractions, and how to make the best chocolate milk in the world." The nurses smiled every time. Miranda cried almost every day when we had to leave Grace at night. Leaving the hospital without your baby feels wrong in a way that's hard to explain. I stayed with her. I cooked. I handled Sophie's schedule. I answered work calls quietly from hospital hallways. And slowly, day by day, Grace got stronger. Then one morning, Dr. Martinez smiled. "She's ready to go home." Miranda burst into tears. Sophie screamed loud enough that a nurse had to remind her we were still in a hospital. Driving home with Grace in the back seat was terrifying. Miranda sat beside her, one hand resting on the car seat. "She's so small," Miranda whispered. "She's perfect," I said. Miranda's apartment no longer looked like a modern showpiece. It looked like life. Baby blankets on the couch, bottles in the sink, Sophie's drawings taped to the refrigerator. That first night at home, Grace cried at 2 in the morning. Miranda jumped up instantly. I followed her. She picked Grace up gently, rocking her. "I don't know if I'm doing this right," she whispered. "You are," I said. Grace settled against her chest. Miranda looked at me, tears in her eyes. "I love her so much it hurts." "I know," I replied. We stood there in the dim light, our daughter between us, and suddenly I didn't want to leave. Not the apartment, not this life. "Stay," Miranda said softly, as if reading my thoughts. "Tonight." "Every night," she corrected. I stepped closer. "I love you," I said clearly this time. No hesitation, no stepping back. Miranda's breath caught. "I love you too," she answered. And this time when I kissed her, there was no fear behind it, just certainty. The board eventually found out about us. There were questions, meetings, awkward conversations. I transferred departments to remove any conflict of interest. Miranda restructured her role so she could balance leadership and motherhood. People talked for a while, then they stopped. Because results speak louder than rumors, Grace grew stronger every week. Sophie became the proudest big sister in Chicago, and Miranda, she changed. Not weaker, not smaller, stronger, softer in the right ways. 1 year later, we stood in that same corner office where she had once told me I was going to be fired. Instead, she held my hand. "We have something to share," she told the executive team. I looked at her, then at Grace playing on a blanket near the window, Sophie beside her showing her picture books. "We're getting married," Miranda announced. The room filled with applause, but all I could see was my family. Later, when the office was quiet again, I wrapped my arms around Miranda. "No regrets?" I asked her. She looked at Grace, at Sophie, at me. "Not one," she said. I had walked into that office thinking my world was about to end. Instead, 5 words had detonated everything I thought I knew. "I'm pregnant. The baby's yours." And somehow, from one impossible night, from fear and risk and doubt, we built something real, something chosen, something stronger than fear. Some battles you run from, but some you face head on, even when the entire world is watching. And if you stay long enough, if you show up every single day, you might just find that the impossible becomes your greatest blessing.